two different sections. But for today, it's actually one of the shortest and the sweetest. We're just doing the straight anatomy of the digestive system. Most of this is probably more so going to be familiar. So this is not the most intense exercise, but I do want to go through the highlights of the digestive system as a whole. So when we're talking about the digestive system, with this particular system, the overall goal of the digestive system is to be able to provide the body with nutrients. So we need a way to get all of the pieces of information, pieces of nutrients that our body needs to be able to do every type of cellular metabolism. We need to give our body those nutrients, but we also need to be able to get rid of waste. So the digestive system will be getting rid of solid waste, and then when we get to the urinary system, which is coming up next, then we will talk about liquid waste. So the digestive system is both giving our body somehow of providing those nutrients that we need, and then we're also getting rid of specifically solid waste in our system. So a little bit of just anatomy of the digestive system is it is actually a hollow tube. It's actually pretty easy. So we're going to name all the parts of this tube, but the digestive system as a whole is essentially just a hollow tube, and it will extend from the mouth all the way down to the anus. So this hollow tube starts at the mouth, but it doesn't actually close off really at any point. There's a couple of sphincters or doors that will cinch the tube, and that kind of acts like a door. But it is a hollow tube straight through from the mouth all the way to the anus. With the digestive system, what we're going to mainly focus on today is the anatomy. So that's going to be more of the physical digestive system. But when we're talking about digestion, so the action, not the actual system name. When we're talking about digestion, there's two types of digestion. There is going to be physical digestion, and then there's going to be chemical digestion. So what is digestion? Digestion as itself is going to be breaking down food into smaller particles. So as we're breaking down our food and we're putting it into smaller particles so we can actually get the nutrients that we need. Particles, items, stuff, pick a term. There's two types of digestion. There's physical and then there's chemical. Physical is going to be any kind of chewing, churning. So what we're talking about today when we do the anatomy of the digestive system, we are going to be talking about the physical structures that are helping with the physical process of digestion. The next exercise, exercise 39, is going to be doing more so the focus on the chemical digestion, and this is going to be through the use of enzymes. So the physiology of the digestive system, the how it digests, will be a chemical process, and we're going to talk a lot about enzymes in exercise 39. So for right now, when we're talking about physical digestion, we're breaking down food into smaller particles, smaller items. We're doing it through the process of chewing, churning. You can also add in mixing to that. Any type of physical movement. So all of the anatomy pieces will fall into this physical digestion. So when we're talking about the digestive system, there's actually going to be two systems. One of them is pretty going to be common knowledge, and then the other one is probably just a different way of thinking about things. So the two systems that we're going to have, the first one will actually be, or two groups, two systems, two groups, pick a term. There will be the GI tract, and GI will stand for gastrointestinal. When we have our GI tract, we're going to have our gastrointestinal tract, and these structures are going to involve the mouth, which starts at the very beginning, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestines, and while your small intestines are called small, When we get there, they're actually not small. They're just narrow. It's the diameter that's small, but the small intestines are actually very, very long. But then you're also going to have the large intestines. And we're going to briefly cover these from an anatomy perspective with the tract all the way through. But when we're talking about the GI tract, what we are talking about is if we were to take our lovely little person who is eating food, whoop, there we go. Here's his eyeballs. When food is coming into his mouth, let's say he's eating some sort of item here. When food is coming into his mouth, it will actually go down into his system. And the first place it will go in is his mouth. So that will be this. Then it will go down his pharynx. So we talked last week about the pharynx being the top part of the throat. So after you have the nasopharynx, the oropharynx, and the laryngopharynx, we're essentially having that food stuff follow that same path. So it's going down our pharynx. When you get to the level of the throat right here, you're going to pass through the connection where the epiglottis is, and the epiglottis will direct food down one tube and air down the other tube. So as food and air are essentially coming into our system, we can put the air down one tube and the food down the second tube. So if you've ever had something go down the wrong tube, essentially that is what you're saying. So in the front, this first one, I'm going to cover it with green. This is going to be air. So that is going to be the trachea. So the trachea sits in front. Whereas what will come back down the back of the throat down here, this is going to be your esophagus. So that is where the food will go down. After it goes to the esophagus, it will then get routed and go through. This esophagus goes all the way down, past our heart, past our lungs, all the way down to below our diaphragm. So here's our diaphragm. This esophagus will come down and he will end up in a structure that is called the stomach. And the stomach is going to be this shaped structure that kind of looks like this. So your stomach. Again, we have food coming in our mouth. It's going down our pharynx, down our esophagus, and around our stomach. It's one long tube. So this connection between your esophagus and your stomach, and then coming out of your stomach, there will be another connection. These two connections are going to be called sphincters. And sphincters will essentially close off this tube, and it constricts the tube. So the sphincter that is going to be at the bottom of the esophagus and at the top of the stomach, so that's the same connection point, that is going to be right here. This sphincter is actually going to be called your gastroesophageal sphincter. So this is your gastroesophageal, which makes sense because that's exactly where it is. It's at the bottom of your esophagus. So that's your gastroesophageal sphincter. Then when food stuff travels into your stomach, it will come down, and at the end of your stomach, before it moves into your next section, your small intestines, you'll also have a sphincter. This is called your pyloric sphincter. So now we have our food stuff. It's come down our esophagus. It's come into our stomach. And then the next place we said it was going to go through was going to be our small intestines and our large intestines. So this is going to be our lower abdomen in our body, right around our, underneath our rib cage, all the way to our groin. This is where we will find our small intestines. So your small intestines are, by definition, very, very coiled. So these small intestines, they are called small intestines not because they are small, but because they are narrow. So the diameter of the lumen, because this is a hollow tube, so the diameter of the lumen is going to be smaller. That's where small intestines come from. So here is my diameter of my lumen. It's going to be narrow, but there's a lot of it. So your small intestines are actually a very, very coiled tube, meters upon meters of coils. but the diameter itself is actually going to be small. Okay, so then after we have our, that's where I ended, our small intestine that will actually be in our abdomen, right around your right hip is where you will have the connection from your small intestines to your large intestines. So your large intestines will actually start around your right hip bone. And your right hip bone will be the connection. And there is actually going to be another place where these will actually connect. There will be a sphincter kind of right there between the two. The other thing that you can also find right here is there's usually a teeny tiny little structure right there. This is actually going to be the structure of what a lot of people need to get rid of for some reason. If it were to have any kind of issues, this is where you will actually find your appendix. It's right around the connection of the small intestines and your large intestines. It's about the size of your little pinky. And it resides right over that right hip bone. So we have food stuff that has come into our stomach. It then, ooh, wrong color. It then goes into our small intestines. It goes through all of these tubes through the entire process. And then after it does, it will then dump into the large intestines. So one thing about the small intestines before we move on to the large intestines is it is a very, very long tube. So it's broken up into a couple sections. So we're going to follow along with me for a second. We will have the section that is closest to our stomach. So this part right here, this small intestine is close to our stomach. So that's going to be this guy. Then we're going to have a section of our small intestines that is close to our large intestines. And so that is going to be, I'm going to color it red so it's the same. That's going to be here. But everything in the middle is going to be our small intestines. But it is a very long tube, so it's broken down. The way it's broken down is the section that is closest to the stomach is going to be called, ooh, so sorry y'all. The section closest to your stomach is going to be called your duodenum. I have also seen it called duodenum. It's pronounced both ways. So the section first is stomach, and then small intestines is going to be your duodenum. So then the middle section of your small intestines is going to be your jejunum. And this is essentially the coiled mass in the middle. All of this stuff. And then the third section is going to be your ileum. And the third section of your small intestines, your ileum, is going to be closest to your large intestines. So that's going to be all of these pieces because it is closest to your large intestines. So your small intestines is actually broken down into duodenum, jejunum, and ileum. And part of the slides you'll be looking at today is going to be the duodenum versus the ileum versus the jejunum. So make sure you're looking at those. So now we have our small intestines and our food stuff that's gone through the entire thing, and then we're dumping into our next area, which is going to be our large intestines. So our large intestines are really cool because they do actually start on the right side of the body at the right hip, and you'll notice that my little tube right here, I have my stuff going up, and here is my tube. I am actually going to switch colors to purple so we can a little bit better see this large intestines. So we're coming up the large intestines. He is purple. And then what he actually does, he doesn't go that high, underneath your stomach, he will now turn. And underneath your stomach, he goes this way. And then he will cross down your other side of your body, and he will go down this way. This is all large intestines, so it kind of makes a little box on the top. And then it'll come down the bottom right here, and then this section will actually then become the external exit of the large intestines. So this is your large intestines. It's essentially this lovely little box. And then if we were to name these as well are going to have names. So the part that is going right here, you'll notice our food stuff has come up into our large intestines. This is going to be called our ascending colon. colon and large intestines are synonymous with each other. So we'll have our ascending colon. The food stuff is going up. And then after it goes up, it will then go across. So this will be our transverse colon. Transverse colon is essentially going across the front of the body. Across, across, across. And then when we get to the other side, onto the left side, the stuff is going to now go down. So on this side, it was called ascending colon. So on this side, it will be called descending colon because it's going down. And then as this stuff comes down, it will continue down the tube and it will keep going. And once we get to this section of the body, this is going to be the end of our large intestines. And this section is going to be your sigmoid colon. And I drew it so it kind of has an S shape to it. So that is your sigmoid colon. That S-shaped right here is where it gets that name. And then at the bottom of the sigmoid colon, you will have your anal canal. And we're one long big tube, so remember we're going all the way out. Well, we need to have a door at the end of this tube as well. So right here at the very end of your anal canal is where you will find another sphincter. So this sphincter is going to be the external because it is the last door between the internal and external environment. The external anal sphincter. And it will be this little door right here. That is what you go through the process of learning how to control when you are potty training. Before that process, it is actually this little sphincter right there that does not have the ability to be controlled. So that is your number one primary digestive system. Most of that we probably know, but that is your gastrointestinal tract, and it is a hollow tube all the way from coming in your mouth to coming out through your rectum, and food stuff goes essentially straight through. But we also know that this is different than the cardiovascular system, where the cardiovascular system was by definition a one-way tract. Blood flowed one direction. It should not go backwards. That was an issue. Whereas in the GI tract, it is also a one-way direction, so the food should go in through the mouth and then out through the rectum. However, as we know to be true, this system can also get reversed and things and foodstuffs can go backwards. It's not quite as problematic as it is in the cardiovascular system, but this is not necessarily by definition a one-way system. You want it to be because the goal is taking food out and being able to get physical digestion and break it down and then pull out those nutrients. However, if for some reason it was to reverse itself and things were to go the other direction, it is not that big of a problem. So that's your GI tract, which is your primary system. But what you also have is going to be your accessory organs. I think I blew it up too much. So this is your GI tract, but now we have our accessory organs. And these accessory organs supplement. So they themselves do not do the process of physical or chemical digestion, but they support it. So some accessory organs are going to be teeth. So those are found up here in the mouth. They do physical digestion because they actually start the process of breaking down by chewing. Then you're also going to have salivary glands. Salivary glands are going to release the enzymes, and these live up here in your mouth. These are going to release enzymes that then are involved in the process of chemical digestion. Another organ you're going to have is the gallbladder. You're also going to have the liver. So these two structures, I'm going to draw it in green, sit on top, essentially, of your small and large intestines. And the place they actually sit is next to your stomach. So they're going to kind of look, here is my liver. That's a very bad liver. And then on the bottom side of it, will be your gallbladder on the very bottom. So your liver will sit on the right side of the body at the same level where your stomach will sit on the left side of the body, and your gallbladder will sit on the posterior side of your liver. And then another accessory organ you're going to have is your pancreas. So we've already talked about pancreas when it came to the endocrine system, because it was really involved with producing and releasing hormones that had to do with regulating blood sugar, glucose, glucagon, all of those things. But it's also it's an accessory organ in the digestive system, because those enzymes are released and they help break down our food stuff. So your pancreas is also a part of this system. And when you're looking at the entirety of the system, your pancreas is going to be hidden behind your stomach. So he actually will sit, if he were there, he is this big tongue-shaped organ that kind of sits like this, but because we can't see him, he sits behind the stomach. But your pancreas is there, and it will actually release those enzymes that he needs, or that he produces, into the stomach and the small intestines to be able to do the process of chemical digestion. So your pancreas is really important. So all of those accessory organs play into the GI tract, but you'll notice all of the structures on the actual GI tract are part of the hollow tube. The accessory organs are all the ones that are just attached to it somehow. So this hollow tube that is going through our entire GI tract, here's our hollow tube. And apparently I did the colors. So here's our hollow tube. The entirety of your hollow tube kind of follows the same 4 layers of your GI tract. Whether it be the stomach, whether it be the small intestines, whether it be your esophagus, they all kind of follow the same 4 general layers. So when you're looking at it like this, remember there's a tube in the middle. So this guy is hollow. So now we're going to take him and we're going to do a cross section. So when we look at it like this, here are our 4 layers. The inside right here is going to be your lumen. He is going to be inside your lumen. Coming out of your lumen, there will be the next layer. This next layer is going to be your mucosa. Your mucosa. And the goal of your mucosa is going to be for secretion, absorption, and protection. So this layer is the first layer of defense from anything that is traveling through the lumen and the rest of the GI tract. So it is a mucosa surface. So it's got a little bit of slime to it essentially. And that slime-ish mucosa layer helps with secretion of things out of the body, absorption of things into the body, but overall it protects so that things don't come in that don't need to. The next layer around this guy will be layer 3, and that is going to be your submucosa. So you've got your lumen, your mucosa, and then your submucosa. And your submucosa is where you will find your blood supply, the connection to your cardiovascular system, your arteries or your veins or your arterioles or your venules. You'll also find your nervous connections. So you'll find some nerves in there. If you've ever had a stomach ache or contractions of any type of GI smooth muscle, you know what that feels like. And that's what you're feeling it in the nerves of your submucosa. This is also where you'll find the lymph connection. We did not go through the lymph. Georgia State doesn't really cover that, but this is where that system would integrate into the digestive system. And overall, this is going to be for nutrition. That's not how you spell it. Nutrition and protection. The reason it's nutrition is because we've got that blood supply that's providing nutrients to this actual tissue, but it also helps with protection because that blood layer, the ability to absorb into your blood, allows for you to have an extra layer of protection. And then this last layer, whoop, on the outside is going to be your muscularis externa. So it's the outside layer and a little bit on the inside. Muscularis externa, and it's in the name. You will also see this as adventia. Is another name you may see. Either way, it's this outside external layer. And this external layer is going to protect as well, more so from things coming into the blood vessel, to the digestive system. And it's also going to allow it to anchor in the body. So this muscularis externa is connected to all the connective tissue to be able to anchor it and have it stay in whatever body cavity it is supposed to be in. So all of your GI tract structures that we talked about right above this will follow this kind of general layers. Some of them are going to have a thicker muscularis externa. Some of them are going to have a really big lumen. Some of them are going to have a small lumen. So the small intestines has a smaller lumen than the large intestines. But they all generally follow this 4-layer of the GI tract. So one thing that you are going to do when you look at these guys is you're going to look at these underneath the microscope. And so some things you're going to focus on today is really looking at the small intestine underneath the microscope, looking at the stomach underneath the microscope. Those are the histology drawings that are due. So when you're looking at those, please keep in mind that you are looking at a structure that is going to have a lumen. So if you are looking, let's say, at the stomach, and you're looking at all of these images, this is going to be, let's say this is your circle slide. If you're looking at it, or if you're looking at any of the images through PhysioX, remember when you're looking at this, there will always be some sort of tissue. There's going to be some more different types of tissue. There's usually going to be a little bit more tissue, whatever that needs. This could be layer 1, 2, and 3. But if you have all of this space right here and it is open, that could be the lumen. So when you're looking at the digestive system, keep in mind that what we're looking at is the walls of the GI tract. So there will always be an open space and then the actual tissues. It will not be so much so solid slides, because by definition, these slides and these structures will have an open space that is a part of it. So that's something to keep in mind as you look through exercise 38. One other thing I want to kind of hit on is some of the accessory digestive organs. We are not going to go in depth. So we're not going to go into the details of the teeth. So you do not need to know all the details regarding the teeth, all the numbers. If you are pursuing some sort of dental hygienist, please look at them, because you're going to need to know those. But for the purposes of this class, we're not going to go through and look at the teeth. And the same thing is going to be true for the details of salivary glands